Good morning and welcome to the launch event of our latest and first report on Mounting Systems Explained. My name is Michael Schmäler. I am the Executive Advisor and Director of Market Intelligence at Solar Power Europe. I'm your host today, and I also had the pleasure to work closely with the lead author of this publication we're launching today, my team member, Lea Le Penhuizenc. This is what we are launching today, the latest report in our so-called Explainer series, where we want to put into focus solar technologies that are usually not so much in the limelight in European solar in general, and when it is about manufacturing in Europe. In early editions, we've covered inverter or cell module production equipment, for example. And now, mounting systems, which is, you can say the third building block of a solar system, and which is indeed somewhat an overseen animal in the European solar industry's technology zoo. First, because it's simply mostly physically covered by the solar modules. You don't see it, especially when the system is on pitched roofs. And second, it was a very low-cost contributor to the system at times modules and inverter prices were much higher. That has changed. When it comes to system hardware, mounting systems are now often the highest cost component. And with tracking systems enabling solar modules to follow the course of the sun, capturing market shares in Europe, mounting systems are also much more visible and I think we can say that more impressive to look at. And third, and I think that's also important, it helps to address something that is increasingly haunting us here in Europe, and that is flexibility needs to shave the midday peak. I'm just referring here to east-west systems and obviously tracking systems. And what's also very important to us and was a driver for this report that we're launching today is that mounting systems are a product where European manufacturers still dominate the home market. This is also not known to many, but in other words, the most costly component of a solar system deployed in Europe is still mostly coming from European companies in Europe. And not only that, we have over 40 companies in Europe active in that field, which we mapped, and several of them are also global leaders. At the same time, we are also seeing international increasing competition. So we have to be on the guard. And before I come to the agenda, I would like to say a big thank you to the sponsors of the report and this webinar, and that's Alimax Green Power, Enson, GSC Integration, K2 Systems, Nextracker, Solarport, and Soltec. Once again, thank you very much for supporting us. Okay, what do we have in the next 90 minutes? We will have first my colleague Lea, she's an analyst in our Market Intel team, providing an overview of the report. We have then another colleague, Annette Ludwig, who's the head of supply chains, share our policy recommendations. And this will be followed by Philipp Kunstl, who's VP of Business Development and Sales in Europe of the global leader for solar trackers, Nextracker, and he will provide us some industry insights. And finally, we want to reflect on what we've learned today. Again, with Annette and Philipp, who will have presented, and they will be also joined by Katharina David, who is the CEO of K2, and by Valerio Mazzone, who is Director of Public Affairs at Galvanizing Europe. Okay, so why don't we start? Lea, the floor is yours. Very excited to see your research shared with us.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning, everyone. My name is Lea Le Penhuizenc, and I'm a junior market analyst at Solar Power Europe. And I'll be taking you through today the insights from our latest briefing paper, Solar Mounting Systems Explained. On the screen here, you have a QR code, which should lead you directly to our online report if you'd like to consult it now as we go along. The QR code will appear also at the end of our presentation. So before we go into this presentation, a quick overview of the topics that we'll be touching on today. So this briefing paper is an overview and an introduction to this segment. So it's the first time that Solar Power Europe is looking into mounting systems in such a dedicated briefing paper, starting with what are solar mounting systems and why do they matter for solar projects? We'll also move on to looking at a picture of the EU industry landscape, so mapping all the different companies active in solar mounting manufacturing in Europe. We'll also look at a quick market and technology analysis that features in the paper for this particular technology. We'll also look at a EU value chain analysis for solar mounting systems. And then we'll briefly also present quickly the 5 different case studies that feature in this report that are showcasing leading expertise for solar mounting systems across a range of different solutions for different EU solar projects. And then after my presentation, I will be leaving the floor to my colleague Annette to share the different policy recommendations that were highlighted as a result of the research presented today. So without any further ado, what are solar mounting systems and why are they so important for solar projects today? After solar modules and inverters, solar mounting systems are the third key building block of solar PV installations. They are balance of systems components largely made of steel or aluminium, and they hold the solar panels in place and secure installations against wind, weather, such as to maximize safety, structural stability, and the durability of the installation. They represent a large share of upfront project costs and play a significant role in enhancing profitability of projects. So more than just the frames that support the PV modules, they determine the angle and the orientation of the installation and are essential components for optimizing solar production and efficiency. And finally, through the innovative design and engineering of mounting systems, they can therefore contribute to system flexibility by optimizing PV generation profiles, as we'll see a bit later. So today, a wide variety of mounting solutions are available to accommodate different project needs, including rooftop mounting, of course, ground mount, fixed systems and trackers, and all other kinds of solar installations in between. The large majority of all currently installed solar PV in the EU is around 64%, is installed on rooftops. So mounting systems in this segment comes in 2 main forms, either designed for pitched or inclined roofs, notably for the residential sector, of course, or they're designed for flat roofs, largely used both in residential segment, but also largely for larger C&I rooftops. For the ground mount utility segment, 2 main types of mounting solutions exist: fixed systems or trackers. Fixed tilt systems are designed and installed with set optimal inclination. And in fact, across the residential, C&I and utility segments, fixed tilt systems are often directly referenced using the overarching term mounting structures. And this is to contrast with another technology, which is trackers. So trackers or tracking systems are exclusively used in ground mount utility scale projects, and they use motors to slowly rotate PV modules to follow the sun's movement during the day, resulting in more solar energy produced compared with fixed systems, especially in the morning and in the evening hours. And historically, trackers are mostly used in geographies with high irradiation in southern regions, but this is evolving today, as we'll see. Finally, mounting solutions exist then for all kinds of PV installations, whether agri-solar, floating solar, BIPV on buildings such as facade solar or roof integrated PV, or even solar carports. Now, why are solar systems, mounting systems, so important for projects? We've broken this down into 6 key pillars. The first is reliability. Mountings provide the structural stability for solar installations. We then have mounting can maximize PV performance of solar installations, mounting for optimizing solar project costs, mounting for adaptability, so mounting for different solar applications. Mounting can contribute to increasing the sustainability of solar projects. And finally, mounting systems can help have air-flexible electricity systems. So on the first point on reliability, fundamentally, mounting systems physically secure PV modules against environmental factors and must last the entire lifetime of the PV system between 25 to 30 years. And so, therefore, they must adhere to international and regional standards, depending on the market, covering areas like structural design, material durability, corrosion protection, and wind or snow load resistance. So, for example, we have the Eurocode 1 as a European standard for load resistance. And we have also corrosion protection standards on an international and a European level. So poor mounting solutions can cause damage to modules, system failures, and the drive to reduce costs in solar projects can be a risk and lead to compromises in the quality of solar mounting structures. So while certifications are essential for the quality and safety assurance, developers are sometimes confronted with inconsistencies and lack of clarity for quality standards across markets in the mounting segment. Moving on to PV performance, mounting systems are of course designed with an optimal tilt and rotation intended for maximizing PV production, but also a well-engineered mounting system also reduces module shading, soiling risk, and temperature-related losses. And in particular, single-axis tracker systems can further optimize solar energy production. Annually, they increase PV generation yields by 15 to 20% compared to fixed installations, and therefore reduce levelized cost of energy. Moving on to project costs. So mounting systems are an important investment for the project developer or consumer and represent around 10 to 20% of a PV's project's capital expenditure costs, or they did so in 2023. And so while this varies greatly depending on the size, location, and type of the project, this share is expected to be rising, and as module prices have decreased significantly in recent years. So aside from material capex costs, also during the installation, mounting systems which are easy to install can shorten project timelines and reduce labor and installation costs. And then during the use phase, reliable and durable systems minimize operations and maintenance costs. So they are quite important for this. Having a quick look at the breakdown of project costs as a share of total utility project costs, we can see that mounting systems represent around 20% of overall capex project costs in 2023 for utility projects. So after modules, in 2023, they were the second largest single hardware cost for the entire installation, higher even than solar inverters or grid connection. And as we mentioned, as module prices have declined sharply since 2023, it's likely that racking and mounting systems, depending on, again, total system cost and location, have the highest share in costs today. So for rooftop installations, on the other hand, since installation labor and inverters represent a larger share of overall investment, racking tends to have a smaller share in project costs, still ranging between 5 to 15% and 20% in the more complex cases. Moving on again to the topic of adaptability. So, of course, there's a wide variety and versatility of mounting products for different rooftops, metal, concrete, or different ground conditions across different countries and regions, of course. And especially in the utility ground mount segment, PV mounting solutions are often tailor-made to the site's specific needs, especially as solar projects increasingly encounter complex terrain, as flat land becomes less easy to access and more expensive in mature markets. And so mounting systems are also increasingly able to adapt to challenging weather conditions. For example, trackers are able to preventatively angle themselves in response to high wind or hail conditions in a way as to protect them from any damage. Moving on to sustainability, from metal sourcing to end of life, PV mounting can contribute to sustainable solar systems in several ways. So from low carbon production through the use of local suppliers, the use of recycled metals, or collaborating with suppliers who are actively working to lower the carbon emissions in their metals produced. In the use phase, durable products, of course, turn into long use phases and increase the possibility of repowering. Steel structures, for example, with thick galvanizing layers can last up to 60 years, which creates possibilities for repowering PV plants with and keeping previous mounting systems with minimal changes. And finally, recyclability. Steel and aluminium are both highly recyclable in the EU, for example, with a 90% recyclability for steel, and also high rates for aluminium. On the flexibility points, so mounting systems can be designed to optimize power generation profiles to produce more energy outside of peak production times, and cannibalization rates are high and the electricity prices are low, zero, or even negative. So flattening the daily production curve to shift generation in the morning and evening is essential for improving the business case and increasing revenues for project developers. So for this reason, tracking systems and fixed east-west orientations are two types of mounting architectures that generate more solar in the morning and evening hours compared to fixed or south-facing projects. A quick note on this, so solar trackers for this very purpose use backtracking or diffuse response technology to determine the optimal tilt of individual rows of panels. For example, when the sun is lower in the sky and panels have shade, inter-row shading. And also diffuse technology is used to determine the optimal tilt when there is cloud cover. So using all these advanced technologies within tracker systems, according to a simulation from leading tracker manufacturer, Nextracker, in 2024, such a tracker system with optimized backtracking software can provide around 30% more value in euros per megawatt hour annually than an equivalent fixed tilt system. This is for a system modeled in southern Germany, and I think we'll also hear a bit more about this in Philip's presentation later on. Not only tracker systems, but also fixed systems have ways of increasing flexibility through east-west orientations, which are also popular in Europe. So this is, instead of installing in projects with a south orientation, panels are alternatively oriented east and west. So although generating less overall solar PV than south-oriented projects, they often help flatten and broaden the generation profile. These also contribute to higher self-consumption rates and match, since they match consumption patterns more. So these are used for flat rooftop systems a lot, also land-constrained ground mount systems, such as this one, but they are also used in agri-PV and vertical PV installations as well. Moving on now to a mapping of solar mounting manufacturers active in the EU. So the mounting structures and tracker segment is one of the few solar segments that is dominated by European and Western players locally in Europe. The EU is home to a large ecosystem of mounting system providers. Upwards of 40 companies in the EU develop mounting solutions across the rooftop, ground mount segments, as well as facade, agri-PV, etc. So this includes recognized global market leaders for trackers, fixed ground mount, and rooftop mounting. So in general, compared to other solar PV components like modules or inverters, where large shares of solar products are imported from outside the EU onto the EU market, local mounting system providers often have a competitive advantage in domestic markets, since mounting structures are mainly composed of heavy, low-cost steel or aluminium components, and international shipping of these components can represent a significant fraction of their cost. So all else being equal, it provides some preference to domestic production relative to imports. This is also compounded by the benefits of shorter delivery times and available support during use phase of the project. So among the top companies mapped by Solar Power Europe, Spain and Germany together host around 60% of the EU's solar mounting system companies, with other top providers also in France and Italy, and Netherlands, etc. Some non-EU headquartered companies are also active in EU markets often taking over production site from other European companies. For example, Chinese Trina Tracker acquired Enclave, a Spanish company, and has production site in Spain. Similarly, some US companies now have production or headquarters in the US. So, for instance, Valmont Solar took over some companies, Convert Italia, and we also have Nextracker that has an office in Spain. So other stakeholders in this landscape that don't appear on the map include metal suppliers, metal processing companies, also testing and certification bodies, etc. Moving on now to technology and market analysis of the paper. Just to highlight that this explainer paper also gives insights into what exactly are racking and mounting made of, and what are we talking about. So for the rooftop segment, made of aluminium or steel, sometimes concrete if there is ballasting to hold the systems in place. We have rooftop systems made of mounting rails, clamps, connectors, brackets to hold the panels to the roof, and then foundations and different types of foundations, whether penetrating, non-penetrating, ballasted foundations for flat roofs, notably, etc. For the ground mount segment in particular, ground mounting systems are largely made of steel, sometimes cement, again used for ballasting, with additional electronic components needed for trackers. So very simply, for fixed structures, there's aerial components, so mounting rails, racks, clamps, rail connectors, etc., and the foundation substructures, fasteners that anchor and fix the systems to the ground. For tracker systems, the similar components, additional torque tubes, dampers, bearings, and also electromechanical parts such as the drive motor and controller that drive the movement of the panels for trackers in general. We have single-axis tracking systems, which can rotate either horizontally or vertically, and dual-axis tracking systems, although much less commonly used or not used really today. These can follow the sun's circular motion across the sky, across two axes. Now for a general market overview of the different used mounting systems across markets. So industry insights indicate that globally, fixed mounting structures and trackers both have somewhat equal market share for utility projects today. So, however, this split varies across markets. For example, the Indian and Chinese markets are known to prioritize fixed structures, likely due to their lower price, faster installation, lower OEM costs, and the overall strong competitiveness on installation costs for large Chinese and Indian utility projects. So according to data from PVCase, looking at future planned projects, both globally and in India, we have up to 87% of all ground mount projects in the Indian pipeline today made up of fixed mounting systems. In Europe, industry sources also estimate around 50% of utility projects to be using trackers in 2024. Now, of course, this is subject to regional variations. In Germany, this is a very fixed mounting system heavy market. And whereas Spain, for example, has an estimated 90% of tracker penetration, according to Wood Mackenzie. A quick note on tracker market growth, which we'll also perhaps talk about a bit later with Nextracker's presentation. This growth is linked to several factors. One of them is a decreasing cost premium. However, they are still on average around 10% higher than fixed systems. Looking now at market leaders, as Michael mentioned at the beginning, European manufacturers still lead the European mounting systems market, thanks to leading players like K2 Systems, Install, which recently acquired Schletter. And now, outside of Solar Power Europe's qualitative analysis, one industry analysis indicates, for example, that the top 4 companies in the European market for solar mounting are based in Germany and hold more than half, from 51 to 63% market share. So also specifically in the tracker space, according again to Wood Mackenzie, EU players still dominate the European tracker market with combined 55% market share in 2024, despite a rise in share from US and Chinese players on the global and European markets compared to 2023. Now, quickly looking also at EU value chains for solar mounting. How are solar mounting systems made, and what is the resilience for this segment in the EU? So first of all, largely made again of steel or aluminium, mounting systems value chains are well developed in Europe, from material production to the installation in PV projects, i.e. all of the stages we see here except raw materials extraction. So that's for iron ore, limestone, etc., bauxite for aluminium. These are usually imported into Europe. To note that steel and aluminium in the EU are both produced in large parts from recycled scrap metal. So generally, mounting system manufacturers, which we see towards the middle on this visual here, they first design the products and engineer them, and they collaborate with two other key stakeholders higher up in the value chain. So first, steel or aluminium suppliers, who provide intermediate steel products and aluminium ingots. And then, while there is some manufacturing performed by the manufacturing companies themselves, a significant portion is made by third-party metal processing companies and OEM suppliers. So they do profiling, roll forming, cutting, drilling of steel or aluminium products, and they also can take charge of the galvanization stage. Then mounting solutions are delivered to PV distributors, wholesalers, or directly to EPC or developers for large-scale projects. And then much of the time, mounting structure assembly occurs at the PV installation site. And during the lifetime of a PV plant, OEM for mounting structures, for trackers especially, OEM is key for ensuring the continuous quality and performance of mounting or tracker systems. So this continues, this image continues throughout the lifetime of the mounting system. Now, in general, looking at mounting systems resilience for manufacturing in the EU, the conclusions also of this report highlight that the sector is concerned by the impact of imports of cheaper components of products into the EU market, incurring risks for quality and resilience. So clear and transparent analysis of solar mounting structures in international trade is actually challenged by the lack of available customs data. It's hard to actually establish whether there is a risk here. However, the European General Galvanizers Association estimates, based on anecdotal evidence from installers' data and site visits, that an increasing share of steel components for the production of mounting systems, up to more than 50% of the supply, now originates from China. And so finally, I'll just give a quick overview of the different case studies that we were able to collect and that bring a lot of value to this report in order to highlight the different expertise that we have in the EU for mounting. So we have case studies from GSC Integration, which is a French manufacturer of roof integrated solutions across Europe. We also have, they describe projects for different community projects, new builds, or having integrated PV on their roofs. Enson also provided a case study describing their 117 megawatts Koniavo PV plant project in Bulgaria. Enson is a Polish mounting startup. K2 Systems also provided a case study describing their activities for fixed rooftop and ground mount solutions across Europe. Nextracker also have a case study describing their activity and their 550 megawatt Ptolemaida PV plant in Greece. And Alimex is a Belgian company that describes their activities across the Netherlands and Romania, notably for a 70 kilowatts solar facade project. And now I will give the floor to my colleague Annette to discuss the policy recommendations that arise from this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Welcome from my side. I'm very happy to shine light on mounting structures and solar trackers with this report. And based on Leah's analysis, we came up with 3 main policy recommendations that I will walk you through in the next minutes. First, we ask for a broader implementation of margin structures in order to measure resilience when implementing the Net Zero Industry Act on the national level. So, as you might know, the Net Zero Industry Act for the first time sets out rules for member states on how to reward sustainability and resilience in renewable energy auctions and public procurement. And the European Commission adopted the Net Zero Industry Act in June last year, followed by secondary legislation, implementing act and delegated act that had been adopted on the 23rd of May this year. So now it is up to the member states to implement non-Paris criteria in renewable energy auctions and public procurement as of 2026. And as part of the secondary legislation this year, there's an implementing act on the list of net zero technology final products and their main specific components for the purpose of assessing the contribution to resilience. And for solar PV systems, the European Commission has listed the components qualifying for measuring resilience, amongst others, PV trackers and their specific mounting structures. And this, to our reading, is a very narrow definition, which implies that only tracker-based mounting components count towards the resilience non-price criterion, potentially excluding large volumes of fixed mount PV systems, which represent around 3/4 of the EU solar market in 2024. Which is why we ask the member states to apply a broader implementation covering all mounting structures on the national level when implementing the Net Zero Industry Act. Second, we ask the European Commission to develop a dedicated EU customs code for mounting structures and for solar trackers that can help track and identify the shipments of these components in international trade, as it is done for solar inverters and modules. The EU Customs Code, for those that are not aware of it, is a standardized international system for classifying traded products, and it's used for customs declarations, statistical tracking, and trade policy measures. Currently, that's what we gathered from companies. Mounting structures fall under broad and non-specific categories. For example, if made of iron or steel, they are typically classified under specific code. If made of aluminium, they are often classified by another EU customs code. And also solar trackers fall under broad and non-specific categories. In some cases, they fall under the same general codes used for mounting structures, which also covers a wide range of steel fabrication items. Therefore, we ask developing a dedicated HS customs code for both solar mounting structures and trackers that would support better data collection, enable informed policy making, and align with industrial policy objectives like under the Net Zero Industry Act, because the Net Zero Industry Act links and refers to the EU Customs Code when listing the components for each net zero technology. Last but not least, we also gathered feedback from members and companies, which is to ask developing and harmonize robust quality standards. We need a single market for mounting quality structures to address current inconsistencies and a lack of clarity in the racking and tracker segment of the solar industry. And thus we recommend the development of harmonized policy standards across 3 key areas. First, structural integrity. Second, transparency. And third, warranties. And these steps will strengthen trust, improve product quality, and reduce procurement risk across the global solar supply chain. Thank you.
Philip, you take over.
Thank you very much. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, but we cannot see you.
Yeah, wait a second. I think I was frozen. Let me see again. Well, I hope this is better. Thank you very much. Very nice to have the opportunity to be talking here. I think the Solar Power Europe initiative to shed more light on the segment of mounting structure is a very important one, and we're very happy to support it and also to be speaking here. Let me see if this already works. Yes, excellent. I wanted to talk a little bit about value today, commanding more value from every megawatt, basically how the industry can battle the currently low electricity prices, especially low capture prices, also high interest rates, and make projects more profitable again. As a public listed company, we need to make you aware of forward-looking statements. We do this with this brief message here, but let's get right into it since we don't have too much time. As many of you know, there's a big debate going on at the moment about the low capture prices, especially that we've seen in the last months across Europe, but especially in Germany. Already in April, capture rates of solar reached lows as low as 40%, and they've stuck around 37% the last 2 months. So this is quite alarming. It's not really surprising, to be honest, because more solar, more success of the energy transition will exactly lead to this, but the low levels are surprising to some. Now, what we've seen over the last years, and this is something not all players have on their mind, is that tracking systems have made significant advances. You know, they've been changed in terms of the rotation angle that they can use. They have been optimized partly, especially our tracking system from Nextracker, for bifacial gains. They can help with snow soiling and other things, and hence increase the value significantly compared, not the value, the megawatt hour output compared to fixed tilt system. This is a study that we've done together with an independent engineering company, Inertis, for a field in southern Germany. We've done multiple sites, but because trackers are not used in Germany at all, and generally less so in northern latitude countries, we wanted to bring this as an example. So in general, of course, it is not a surprise that tracking systems, because they tilt the modules to the sun in the morning, and also in the evening, they produce more megawatt hours in the mornings and in the evenings. This is what you can see here across the 24 hours of the day and compared to fixed system on the left. So approximately, as we've seen before, 22.8% across the year. Now, I think what many people have not thought about maybe sufficiently yet is that tracking systems generate more value exactly because they generate more energy when it's worth the most. We have a lot of days now. We took one example day, June 23rd of 2024, with negative prices during a lot of the midday hours. Obviously, a PV plant would switch off or not inject electricity into the grid, especially if the prices are quite negative. If the prices are marginally negative, some plants continue to inject electricity into the grid because sometimes the certificates of origin are more worth than the negative electricity price, but I don't want to go into that much detail. So for our study here, also, we have assumed that power plants would just switch off if the prices are zero. But what you can see is that the value before in the slide before, we've seen the megawatt hours that were produced, or kilowatt hours that were produced at a certain hour of a fixed tilt system, of a tracking system. But these additional hours in the morning and in the evening are really worth a lot more. Here you can see probably approximately 3 times as much as for the fixed tilt system in the morning as well as in the evening, because the electricity prices during these hours are so much higher. So not only are trackers generating more megawatt hours, I think this is something everybody knows in the industry, right? And the exact number, of course, depends on the exact layout comparison. It very much depends on the exact location, be it in Germany, be it in the UK, be it in Hungary, Greece, Spain, or elsewhere. But not a lot of companies, not a lot of players, developers, utilities, IPPs have started really looking at the value. And for example, we have matched, because we think that the forecasts are often not so certain when it comes to the hourly values. we have looked at actual electricity prices. So we've taken a system, done the simulation, same site in southern Germany, fixed tilt system versus tracking system. We've seen that it does, more than 20% more megawatt hours, but more importantly, last year with real electricity prices matching the specific hour of generation with a specific value of that hour, it generated more than 30%, specifically 33.8% more value. And I think this is something that is quite interesting. Let me also share a few words about Nextracker. Nextracker is the global market leader for the last 10 years in tracking systems. We have a market share of 26% globally. We have more than 130 gigawatts shipped of solar tracking systems. We have a global presence with 1,400 staff worldwide, 10 global offices, and we have more than 80 dedicated employees here in Europe, for example, in Madrid, which is our headquarters, also in Sevilla, but we have people in the UK, in other places. I'm personally located in Germany and Berlin. I think one thing that's very important is we have very robust product lines that have been tried and tested over the gigawatts that you've seen above. We do trackers, the software and controls, and also we support very much with our digital O&M solutions. Deep expertise is in the team. We are really an innovation leader, 350 years of collective PV experience, and are continuing with new ideas to generate more electricity when it's valued the most, basically. We did an IPO in February 2023 on NASDAQ, the US technology exchange, and are roughly valued at $9.4 billion in market cap. You've seen our shipments before the 130 megawatts, of course, because US is our home market and because the US is a very big tracker market. The biggest share, the biggest gigawatts installed are in the US and in specifically in California, but all across the US, also Canada, with 90 gigawatts. In Europe, we're very strong as well with 9 gigawatts installed. We have 5% of our global reach is installed in Europe. We're also very strong in Latin with 22 gigawatts. Australia Pacific, 10 gigawatts, MEA, Middle East and Africa with 6 gigawatts, and India with 6 gigawatts. And maybe last but not least, as we are continuing to innovate, one of the important features of our tracking system that you can add on is True Capture. This is a very innovative tracking algorithm that has really been optimized to maximize the gains in the high value hours, especially in the morning hours, in the evening hours, and also in diffuse light hours when, again, the value of electricity is quite high. So we see that with True Capture, using this technology compared to our basic standard backtracking algorithm that most other players have as well, we can gain between 1 to 4% of additional energy. Of course, this depends very much on the site. It depends how complicated the site is, how complex the terrain is, how hilly it is as well. And the way we engage with our customers is typically we look at a specific site and a specific project, and then we make an estimate and then prove it again in the field. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm very curious about questions and answers later, and maybe some interest that you can certainly direct at me. Here's my email address, pkunze@nextracker.com. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Philip, for the insights. We have now 45 minutes for our panel, so I would like to ask the panelists to switch on their cameras. And I've prepared basically an outline of the questions, but it's great that we are getting also questions in the Q&A. So we will try to build that in or address them once, towards the end of our panel. So please feel free to comment or add questions whenever you have something. Okay, so maybe let's start with a general open question to everyone. We just have seen that the importance of trackers has simply increased for various reasons. I think cost and the need for flexibility and I think there's also, of course, resilience. So maybe if everyone could say very briefly what has changed in the tracker business for him, her in the last year or so. So when we look at the recent shows, actually, in particular Intersolar Smarter E in Munich recently. So what has changed in this environment, actually, where there's a lot of price pressure, obviously, where the market is somewhat also stagnating. So what's your key takeaway now from you as a stakeholder in this segment? Maybe let's start with the newcomers first. Maybe Katharina.
Hello, Michael. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being on this panel. Let's say you ask for tracker, but you mean, I would say, mounting systems in general. I'm assuming. Let's say, of course, with the competitive, it's a very competitive and price pressured market. But on the other hand, let's say, the industry gets far more elaborated, or let's say mature, and so therefore quality gets a certain importance. And what we see, thank you first of all for this really nice presentation also of the study you did, Leah. What you see is the importance and the important role we are taking. If I think about when I started with KG Systems, when we started with KG Systems, it was like 2% of the balance of system costs were the mounting system, 2 to 5%, and now we are a really important part, and we are really have an important role also in the whole energy transition and in the energy production. That's why, for example, our main role is in the rooftop systems, really with the east-west production. But what we see is really highly competitiveness. What we see is here and there really quality issues, and we try to bring, let's say, we try to keep quality and also standards really on its importance. I think that's for brief. And then, of course, we have some issues with tariffs, etc., and non-tariff CBAM considering. But I would say we're talking about that later on, what could be the impact of really having European production and having that as an important part, let's say, what we are doing in the moment.
Thanks, Katharina. So then let's maybe bring in Valeria, also representing a segment in Brussels. So what are you seeing in the mounting segment now?
Well, good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to join this webinar panel. What would I say about that is when we refer to mounting systems, first of all, we really look at the ground mounted because these are mainly made of steel, which is let's say the one that is more interesting for my industry. And what you see is that over the last few years, we have a big issue, which is that Europe is importing, especially when it comes to the fixed tilt structures, large volumes of those components from non-EU countries, is mainly from China. And this, of course, has a big impact on European industry, the European manufacturers that basically fabricate those components here in Europe, and also the steel industry quite deeply. So we visited many solar plants under construction over these few last years, and we see this trend is increasing. Of course, the low cost of those structures is sort of leading market decision. So what I see is that probably the market should not be so this decision should not be led only by the market dynamics, but let's say policymakers, public procurement authorities, but all stakeholders from them to, let's say, EPC contractors, designers, they should all basically have a common objective to make the European industry stronger and, of course, to prioritize European products. Thank you.
Okay. Philip, you're coming from the US to Europe. You're European, working for an American company. So how are you seeing that? You're the market leader. Also, what has changed actually in the segment over the last year? Also, how you look at it in Europe?
Hey, Michael, thank you very much for giving me the word. I'm sorry, I'm still having a little bit of issues with Zoom, but I think you can see me again now with video as well. Excellent. Yeah, very good question. I think especially the last couple of months, I recognize one huge change. I think there is a flight towards durability, towards quality, which, oops, can you still hear me? Sorry. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Excellent, thank you. Which Katarina also mentioned before, right? I don't know if many of you are aware, but there was a very big hail event in the US a while ago, which already started this topic. There was a relatively big hail event in Bulgaria recently, a couple of weeks ago, and a massive hail event just in Germany, even just a few days ago in the south of Germany. So I think people are more and more looking at, how can they protect themselves and especially their PV assets from heavy weather such as hail events. We hosted an insurance event in London last week. London is the global insurance hub. And it was, there was a lot of demand from insurance companies that wanted to hear about the solutions that can protect them. And they're willing to offer lower insurance rates for products where they see a real benefit for heavy weather, such as hail, for example. Maybe I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Annette, maybe I think trackers are, we're having tracker companies for quite a while, but we put them now in our spotlight. So what are you seeing?
What I'm seeing is that, let's say, mounting structures and solar trackers gained attention during the Net Zero Industry Act negotiations and the secondary legislation. Because with the Net Zero Industry Act as the core file on the European level and parts of energy auctions, EU countries have now the possibility to reward project bidders based on non-price criteria like sustainability and resilience. And resilience is measured with the help of an implementing act that further specifies the list of net zero technologies and the list of net zero components to be, let's say, applicable for resilience. And there we have been in touch with Galvanizers Europe and also a couple of other members and companies to help boosting and advocating that mounting structures and solar trackers make it on the list of net zero component for solar PV systems on the European level, that they are recognized as an important component for solar PV systems and that it's covered by all mounting structures. I have to admit, in the end, as mentioned earlier, that the European Commission just decided to add solar trackers and their specific mounting structures, so excluding part of the segment, which is why, again, on the national level, when it now comes to the member states from next year on, we ask them to, let's say, to go beyond that restriction. And a second learning is that we became aware of that there so far is no dedicated EU customs code for solar trackers and mounting structures, which also helped us to develop that policy recommendation, which we will now take further on the European level.
Okay, let's maybe stick a little bit to ENZIA. So I think maybe in the first block, let's talk a little bit about the policy recommendations. Maybe Annette, just since you already mentioned NZIA, so why was 3/4, or why do you think 3/4 of the market was not taken into consideration? Was it lack of knowledge, or what was the reason?
Yeah, I mean, that's just my personal assessment. So I perceive that there's a lack of knowledge about the importance that solar trackers and mounting structures play when building a PV system. So we provided a lot of evidence on the European level about solar trackers and mounting structures. Also was a bit difficult to get some official data and intel on market shares, which also led us at some point to drafting this report, Mounting Structures Explained, to raise attention and to collect data and insights on that component and market segment. And the second is that we noticed the Net Zero Industry Act refers to the EU Customs Code when it comes to defining components for the net zero technologies. And there we noticed also a lack of a dedicated EU Customs Code for solar trackers and mounting structures. As we explained in our policy recommendation chapter, it's still mixed and not, let's say, not specified. And this is also an ask what we will take further forward.
Okay, so maybe let's go to our colleagues from Galvanizing Europe. So Valerio, are you sharing the same concerns as Annette, or how happy are you with NZIA, and what are you seeing with the customs code topic?
Well, mounting systems, whether fixed tilt or trackers, are both essentials components of any solar installation, as we heard before. So let's say the fact that they were not included in the NZIA framework is something, of course, that is difficult to understand. Actually, there was we didn't see any specific rationale for this decision from the Commission. And actually what we know is that the mounting structures for fixed tilt structures were included in the last draft that was basically discussed and ready to be approved, but some member states strongly opposed this inclusion, and then the mounting structures for fixed tilt were pushed out the list. But many other member states were totally in support. They were supporting the inclusion of all mounting structures in the NZIA framework. So again, there is no valid reason to exclude them, in my opinion, because they are still essential. They are in high demand, and actually they are, as we saw, 3/4 of mounting systems are represented by them. So they are still more demanded than trackers. And we know for sure by first experience that what is happening is that they are sourced from China and other non-EU countries. So this is my contribution to that.
Okay, thanks. Let's talk a little bit about also, I think that was mentioned by a few of you, the challenges also that we're seeing now in Europe from competition. Actually, I believe there's a pretty healthy competition between the US and Europe. I think Nextracker as a market leader is coming to Europe, but we also see, of course, that K2 and Enstal, for example, have quite some market shares in the US. And so I think that sort of works here. The question is one thing, so what changes now with OBBB actually? So in terms of for European companies, how this environment changes to that side, and in general, maybe also Katharina, How, and also to Philip, how do you see actually now also stronger competition from Chinese companies in Europe? So I think there's two reasons, as I understand. So some big installers are actually buying bulk in China and bringing it as part of their solutions. And of course, there's also the big vertically integrated Chinese companies who more and more try to turn into solution providers simply to to offer a package and also bring in domestic solutions. So how are you reacting to this?
Shall I start? Okay. Okay, so first of all, maybe just adding quickly, if we are thinking about playing or the same level playing field, I think it's really important that the whole mounting system would be considered in the NCIA, because let's say we are an important part. We're important for also on a let's say on a risk level. If we would have big tender projects where modules would fly from the roof, for example, it could also be on a damage level be quite risky. So I think I'm still hoping that there will be some adjustments, but that would be good. Let's say, and also the HS code would be important to have one for mounting systems, so we really could also see what's going into the European Union, because otherwise it's very difficult to have to allocate what's going on and to have the same level playing field. So therefore, and if we are for example the big installers importing bulk from China, let's say there the CBAM could on one hand as well help if we would allocate that carbon footprint costs, which is still, let's say, we are collecting data, but we are still not, let's say, it has still no impact on the price. So the HS code would be maybe a good way to do that, because let's say what we see is in mounting systems, let's say in the whole steel and aluminum production in Europe, there has been really highly efforts for the ESG criteria going towards net zero, etc., etc. So that has a huge investment part. And on the other hand, we're importing on a huge volumes from China, aluminum and steel products, which could be easily manufactured in Europe. So therefore, I think we need some regulations, honestly. And it's clear that, let's say, if you're thinking about PV, you never think about mounting structure. You always think about energy production. So on a policy level, it's clear that we are not really into the limelight. So that one has to be adjusted, and it would help. So the other thing which could help is really, let's say, harsh weather conditions are arising. So with harsh weather conditions, maybe quality issues are getting more into glance. So then the importance of mounting systems help. So that could be, but we really have to be aware that not the same things are going on than what we saw in the inverter industry, etc., because also here, let's say we notice attacks, but we notice, let's say, different ones. In rooftop systems, it's not as big because it's a very fragmented market, you need dedication solutions for all kind of rooftops. In ground mounts, we see that, but yeah, some tariffs would help there. I think more putting ESG criteria more into upfront would help to get the same level playing field.
Mm-hmm. Philip?
Michael, may I add something? Probably.
I think we cannot hear Philip. Maybe
I'm very sorry. Can you hear me now? Probably it's not
yeah.
optimal, but I'll just try to keep it brief. Yeah, very sorry. I'm really having technical issues. That's not great. So first of all, we're not too concerned about the competition from Asia, we have a lot of customers that tried other products. And, unfortunately, this takes 1 to 3 years time because you have to source it, install it, and then wait for the examples. But a lot of customers who have done so are coming back to us and are really going for quality, basically. We're also seeing more and more local sustainable sourcing that people are asking for, and also our low carbon trackers. So both, there's more interest for that. And then our, tracker that we can offer from next year on, which will be 100% European components. We also see more of the demand there. I think as an industry, really, we need to focus more on this value topic that I talked about before, because a lot of developers, I've worked with a big utility until like just a few months ago, and the project economics are not great at the moment, right? And we need to make sure that the PV project economics are attractive and we're generating electricity when it's most needed, basically. And this is also in a lot of markets that have not been traditional tracker markets, like Germany, like the Baltics, like Scandinavia. And this is something where we focus on strategically to work with customers, and we're seeing quite a lot of interest. Thank you.
Maybe you can actually address also some of the questions that were simply posed in the Q&A section. So also about, trackers being, or the utilization of trackers in Central Europe or Northern Europe. Actually, Northern Germany, there was one question. And so, how is it changing now? Are you seeing now real demand with low capture rates and negative electricity prices, demand for flexibility? Is it really or can you see that also really in markets that were traditionally fixed mounts system markets?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. I mean, we've installed our first trackers in the UK, for example, 6 years ago, and the customers there are extremely happy with the performance. We have installed trackers recently in Scandinavia, in Sweden, for example, in Denmark, and there are more and more people customers from all across these markets that are coming to us that are starting to understand the pressure on their projects, basically, and are looking for more solutions. It doesn't mean that the tracker is the best solution for every field, right? But I think as a responsible developer utility IPP, you need to just test 5, 10, 20 different layouts, including different technologies, fixed, tilt, east, west, maybe a vertical, and as well as trackers, single axis horizontal trackers for sure, to see what the most valuable and profitable project will be in the end.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Valerio, you wanted to comment?
Yeah. Yes, I wanted to add something after giving a thought of what was discussed so far. So the discussion on qualitative criteria, the importance of durable, sustainable products was, of course, brought by the ENZIA legislation, which probably has this positive thing. But so quality is important. So it's important also now to understand that it's important to get the right specification when it comes to these essential components. So the right specification for the components and their location makes a change if we want to deliver more durable and therefore sustainable components. We need to invest in quality mounting structure. So this is important. And also, again, looking at the positive, probably the fact that at least the mounting structure for trackers were included in the ENZIA framework would help this discussion on the sustainability, but also the importance of protecting the production in Europe, at least for these structures.
Okay, thanks. Let's stick a little bit about quality. I think everyone has mentioned that. So what can we do there in terms of also standards and what's needed here in terms of harmonization and more robustness of quality standards? Okay, we have a lot of standards. We know also standards are usually costly and take time. So what can be done here? Katharina?
Yeah, I think we have to really do that in two segments. Let's say ground mount has different conditions than rooftop systems, because due to the fact that potential risk for people, for humans. So that one we have on rooftop systems. So therefore we have clear standards through the Eurocode, and also clear, let's say, what every company needs to do. And therefore I think that's more important, especially in tender projects, etc., looking what's going on there. So that one would be an effective barrier if we are really looking into structural validation. But as you mentioned, it costs a lot, and on the other hand, we have a very dynamic industry, and getting all these European approvals needs time, etc. But that's how it is, because let's say if we're looking at the rooftop system market, there we are just a part of the construction industry. In essence, we are construction part, and PV is getting more and more a part of a building construction. In ground mounts, also there, I think it's really important to validate and see a certain kind of quality level, because we want to keep and the asset needs to be, we need a certain IRR. So I think it's also there, it needs to take into consideration. But there we see as well, let's say, a trend that some super low cost products are a little bit going out of the market, because bad experiences help sometimes to go back to quality. And we see that these, especially from investors, etc., is really that their quality is really getting important.
But how much education is needed actually for procurement managers of developers or EPCs? Because I feel actually they should know, right? So if you look into a big project, actually you spend quite some money on this, huh?
Yeah, I think, but I see there a trend on the procurement side. Of course, they like to squeeze, etc., etc. That's normal. That's their role. But especially in bigger companies, and I really see a trend of going towards quality out of experiences they did in past, and of course, having their investors in the background, there's a big trend in going towards more quality.
Okay, and let's maybe talk a little bit about also price dynamics. So modules prices tanked over the last 2.5 years, and I think also so that for inverters, prices coming down now, storage prices, battery prices are more and more under pressure. So how do we see that for the mounting segment? So for both fixed and trackers, Katharina, Philipp.
Let's say, of course, let's say, coming back to the tariffs, that would help a little bit. So there is a big pressure, and of course, with a stagnation in the market and quite somehow a little bit consolidated mounting systems area, but we see a high pressure at competitive, and therefore quality is one criteria to get some out of the market, or let's say to get there some kind of validated area. And on the other hand, what we really see is struggle of a lot of companies which go under costs or really on super low margins, and that one, of course, is not healthy for sustaining here a mounting system industry as well. But that's what we've seen, and we are still assuming, not knowing what's going on in different markets. We might have more market shrinkness in Germany, which is a big market in Europe. We don't know. There are some markets under risk, so that even ends up to more competitiveness, and then quality margins, etc., of course, will shrink due to that competitiveness landscape we do have out, or also as a conclusion of policy and not foreseen policy. And there might be some big changes in autumn this year.
Okay. Maybe Philip, Valerio,
Yeah.
how do you see that?
I think there's certainly, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I think there's certainly price pressure. There's always price pressure, right? Especially with reducing electricity prices. I think what we have discussed before, the fact that the mounting structures are a bigger share of the overall project cost is actually a good thing for us because customers are paying more attention to structures. They're looking for quality more. They try to understand what the differences are between different suppliers, especially with the reduction of the Chinese market that is expected for later this year, next year. I think we are very much in risk of seeing a wave of failures of Chinese companies again, like we had like a decade ago or something like that. So people will really need to pay attention how solid their supplier is, especially on the tracking side. You really want to work with somebody who will stay with you the next 10, 15 years, because you need spare parts, you need to work with the tracking system. It's a moving part system, right? And one Nextracker has been the best performing solar stock over the last year. We're very profitable. You know, we've increased our market cap basically, and what we're also seeing is that more and more of our customers are trying to source direct. What is already the standard for modules, right? Because it was a huge component of the overall system cost, is that they don't go through the EPC for the mounting structure, but they go direct. Basically, they know, they do the quality search basically of the component suppliers. They decide with whom they want to work. Also, they want to standardize because they want to work not with 10 different suppliers, whoever is the cheapest, but they want to have 1, 2, 3 suppliers maybe. You know, maybe only one supplier in some cases in their mix to be able to reduce the cost and standardize operation and maintenance also. And this is something that before was thought of impossible because, you know, the EPC needs to make sure that it's installed well, the mounting system. But we actually see that this is very well doable. If you structure a good contract, then you can separate the risks and make sure that the EPC does its job despite the fact that you're sourcing directly.
Mm-hmm. Valerio, maybe you
Yes.
want to comment?
Well, a cost-effective approach decision is to go for quality. And for example, for the ground-mounted, the steel mounting system, the protection against corrosion, as you know, is key. So there are different solutions. The most effective is the bichopped galvanizing, which result in applying basically a thick protective zinc layer on the components after they are fabricated. And this allows these components to last for decades, even 50, 60 years and beyond that. So this allows the components to be also reused during the revamping operation. So this is a cost-effective approach that save money and is also extremely sustainable. So it's important to really pay attention to the different solutions that the market offers and to specify to get the right specification for the products and the location of the products.
Okay. Let's maybe talk or try to answer a few of the questions that we got in the Q&A. I think some of them were already answered, some not, and I don't know. I just would read them if you feel actually whoever feels he wants to answer, please pick it up. So I think Katharina, you already mentioned CBAM. That's one of the first ones. So is CBAM once implemented expected to benefit the EU manufacturers? Do you want to add something?
I can add some. Let's say also when we are talking with the European Aluminum Association, for example, let's say they are hoping, of course, that CBAM will bring some efforts because if we are looking at the steel and aluminum industry, they're really doing a lot for fulfilling ESG criteria, especially really reducing their carbon footprint. And so CBAM would there be really helpful because it would not only, let's say, go towards China, but really towards non-EU production. And so that, and I think it's kind of also a different thing to go just on tariffs, but really going on criteria which help to reduce the carbon footprint. And so let's hope that that will be an effective measurement to bring there some same level playing field.
Let's maybe also talk a bit about technology. Insurance question was also here from Paula, this question. So how do different mounting systems impact insurance premiums? So that they've been apparently challenged for a product on a ballasted system in Germany. Are you seeing also issues here, or
let's say, honestly spoken, ballasted systems is, let's say, we are doing that now since 12 years. Of course, there the industry improved a lot. When we think how we started and what we are doing now, the main, let's say, quality players, it's a lot of work with wind tunnel testing and really not reducing to the max. Because if we are thinking about, you have a rooftop and then it's just sitting on top and you ballast it, it really needs very good engineering. We are all going in wind tunnel testing, and of course trying really to do our best. And so therefore it's really important to look at which kind of ballast, because at the end, a lot of times it's just like, oh, I take this company because they have less ballast than with the other one, but that's the wrong attitude. That's the wrong approach, because we really have to think about harsh weather conditions are rising up. So we really need to have validate that in total, that we will have a rooftop system for the next 25 years on top of the roof. And so therefore it's important to look what is the structural validation, what is the wind tunnel testing in the background. And that helps for the insurance company to consider. For example, there's also technical approval. For example, we have a German German approval and just applying for the European one. That helps as well, that external testing bodies really got the approval of doing it in the right way.
Let's talk a little bit about circularity, sustainability. How is that working with mounting systems, tracking systems? So I think who wants to take that?
I can take that. Circularity is an important aspect for the mounting systems. Fortunately, the secondary legislation, the implementing legislation of the Net Zero Industry Act has recognized this aspect. And the Article 9 in particular is specified that circular approaches and circular products should be somehow taken into consideration in the context of auctions and public procurement. This means that the public procurement authorities in auctions and public procurement should take this into consideration as a non-price criteria. So this is very important. So to design for use at the end of the life, choose totally recyclable materials, and of course avoid critical raw materials when designing and building these mounting structures. So in our case, fortunately, steel and zinc are totally recyclable. So not only they allow reuse and revamping operations, but when they are not needed anymore, they can totally be recycled.
Okay, anyone wants to add?
Yeah, maybe I also combine that with that wood. Let's say, why don't we use wooden construction for example, ground mounts? Some of you might remember there have been some approaches in wood in, I think, 15, 20 years ago. The durability of wood, to use wood for ground mounts, for example, is really not feasible. On one hand, it's very expensive. It would be very expensive, and really getting 25 to 30 years would be a huge effort to do that in wood, and wouldn't even be as sustainable as we think, because first of all, it's a sustainable construction element, wood, of course, but let's say we need if you look at, for example, the wooden demand we do have in Europe, it would not help because there we are already doing some strange things, cutting down forests where we should not, etc., etc. But mainly out of a durability perspective, and that it would not be sustainable. So therefore, even if we look at steel and aluminum, which have a high, let's say they really need a lot of energy for production, recycled aluminum anyway needs just 5% of the overall energy production, because first of all, doing the billets in aluminum needs really a lot of energy. And therefore steel and aluminum, in the way that we can recycle them, helps a lot to fulfill somehow more sustainable criteria.
Okay, thanks. I think there are some questions also regarding price and performance of trackers versus fixed. I would not like to touch that here, because of course everyone has a different opinion depending on where you come from. So I think this homework probably should be done when you source your products. But maybe I think what I found still interesting was one question, and that might be one of the last before we do a final round, is actually also, is there a case for, and that was from Sven Goethals, a case for trackers on C&I systems actually also, or large rooftop systems, and what would be the minimum advised size for a tracker project? Maybe Philip, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, we've had this question come up a number of times. To be honest, for rooftops, I don't see tracking systems, just because the winds are even higher, and you need to understand that with the height of the structure, the wind loads increase exponentially, basically. So we don't really see a good application there. For C&I projects in general, I do. For example, there's more and more clients that are looking for direct wire projects. The field might not be exactly in their neighboring, let's say, land, but for example, 3, 4, 5 kilometers, sometimes 10 kilometers away, and with grid connections becoming more complicated anywhere, this is something that can happen. In the past, we have mostly focused on projects of 20 megawatts and above, but we've recently started a distributed generation program. We have standardized certain processes. It's not only about the product itself, about the delivery of the product, but it's also about contracting, warranties, execution. We do this with execution partners, with EPC partners, where we go down to even projects of 1, 2 megawatts or something like that. But then we would like to see a number of projects being able to be executed with the same more or less set of partners. At least one of the partners that will be our customer should be the same, and that would then be possible, absolutely. So smaller project sizes is something that happens also, especially on agri-PV, actually, which is another topic that we haven't talked about yet, where structures also play a very important role. And here also sometimes smaller project sizes are sought after by the clients.
Okay, thanks. So maybe a final round. So everyone maybe could complete that sentence. I would see a healthy and sustainable European or made Western industry active in Europe in the field of mounting systems and trackers if the following boundary condition is met. So what's your policy ask here to keep this segment thriving and not kind of see a destiny like cells modules? So who wants to start first? Maybe Philip, continue.
Well, yes. What do we need in Europe to have a locally striving company, or a locally striving market? I'm always a fan of create the markets, right? Create the markets, make sure that they're sustainable, make sure that they grow. Unfortunately, now in many countries and from many politicians and policy sides, we have a reduced interest in the climate change and tackling the climate change. I think as an industry, we need to make sure that this topic stays top of mind and that we continue installing more PV. I think it's very important to work with energy storage as quickly as possible, make the regulation straightforward and easy to adapt, and also grid connections, because these are the bottlenecks right now. And I think if we do that, then there will be a good industry. Of course, we could think about tariffs. Again, we have 80 manufacturing sites across the world. We're happy to supply from Europe. But I think what we've seen in the US is that the systems are getting much more expensive. And then, of course, also power prices from renewables are much more expensive. So we need to be careful with making that selection. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying we need to take it into consideration.
Okay. Katharina?
I really would like effective CBAM, as I mentioned before, and HS codes would help as well to dedicate that right. And then I think we need to have a competitive market area, and we need to show why quality matters and why, let's say, doing the right approach and bringing the right solution on the market is important. So I would not have, I'm not a fan of too many tariffs, but really CBAM, I think would be, effective CBAM would help.
Okay, super. Thanks. Valeria?
I would say let's pay more attention to mounting systems in the future. So let's look at their quality, let's look at their origin. So it's important to know what you are getting when it comes to protection against corrosion. Be aware of the different systems, be aware of the different, let's say, outcome of your choices. And of course, ensure the correct specification always for the right components in the right location. Thank you.
Okay. And then Solar Power Europe, Annette, what?
Yes, I would like to close also with 4 points. First, I see a resilient segment in Europe. First, when all mounting structures are covered under the list of net zero components of the Net Zero Industry Act secondary legislation, and that they are also implemented on the national level. Second, if we finally have a separate EU customs code for solar trackers and for mounting structures. Third, if we have quality standards in place. And last but not least, I would also reiterate if we have an effective carbon border adjustment mechanism in place.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. So then let me just finalize. I just have a few slides. Leah, if you could maybe show them again. Now can share. Here we are. So first of all, of course, I want to say thank you. Thank you to my colleague Leah for writing the report, for the sponsors, obviously, for the panelists, and for the audience staying with us for this 90 minutes. Next slide, please. Here is the QR code, so you can download the report. It is available and uploaded as of the beginning of the webinar. So please feel free to download it. You can also obviously go to the website. Next slide, please. Just think about another topic, our Battery Storage Europe platform, which is also very important to us. So where flexibility is the name of the game for the energy sector in Europe, for the energy transition. That's why we're looking also into storage. One reason, didn't talk about so much on the panel on this, but this is also one important factor. And of course, this is also why we created a new platform. And next slide, please. And please, think about membership. So we are here to support you, whatever concerns you, to have a strong European solar sector and get the market also growing. We're seeing a somewhat stagnating market this year. We're doing our utmost actually to keep solar on the map of politicians. So if you are not a member of Solar Power Europe, please think about joining us. Once again, thanks to everyone. That was very insightful, and looking forward to see you soon again. Everyone, please have a nice afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.